What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, September 22nd, 2020, getting into the week here. And we have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. In fact, we've got a lot of news here. We may delay opening the phones here, but we will open them later in the show so that you can get in there with your comments and questions and so forth. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, feeding the giant mutant hamster in that wire wheel that powers everything. And so let's get right on into the news. Tropical Storm Beta made landfall in Texas. There's flooding in Houston. Heavy rain batters the Gulf Coast, and they're expecting a 4-foot surge to the area. And they're still recovering from the earlier storms and hurricanes that came on through. So they're having a rough time down there in the Gulf course. And the hurricane season still is not over. So there may be more coming. They've gone through the entire alphabet of names, and now they're using the Greek alphabet to name the storms here. Okay, we're still seeing the aftermath of the passing of the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and Amy Coney Barrett emerges as the front runner to fill Ginsburg's seat after meeting Donald Trump at the White House. Barbara Lagoa falls to a distant second, but they say she's still in the running here. And the Democrats are having a real hard time with the fact that she's a devout Catholic, she's anti-abortion, she's a strict constitutional originalist, and they have a real problem with that because, of course, the Democratic agenda is to transform this country into something else completely different here. So right now, she's the odds-on favorite to be nominated. Trump has announced he will nominate somebody on Saturday, right after Ginsburg's funeral here. Okay, now Ginsburg herself in 2016 stated there is nothing in the Constitution that prevents the president from a final year Supreme Court pick. And that's absolutely true. Donald Trump is president for 4 years, not 3.5. And the Democrats are trying everything they can to try and derail this. But as of right now, the GOP does have the votes in the Senate to confirm a nominee, whoever that may be here. The Democrats are basically powerless to stop this from happening through any legal procedure. Of course, extra legal procedures are another matter entirely, and we could see what's going to happen there. But Senate Democrats and their liberal allies confronted the reality Monday. There is no path to blocking Trump's pending Supreme Court nomination other than a political pressure campaign that peels away a minimum of 4 GOP votes. Now, 2 of the Senate Republicans have already said they're not going to vote at all because they're also convinced that the next president should have the choice. Personally, I think the Republican Party should deny future funds to these 2. But at this point, Mitch McConnell is saying they do have the votes to confirm even without those 2 missing senators here. So deep into their 6th year in the minority, Democrats can use some procedural tactics that might briefly delay the confirmation process. But if at least 50 Republicans approve of Trump's pick to replace the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, that nominee is certain to be seated. Now, all eyes are out there in Arizona on the special election there to replace one of their senators. It's a very tight race. And obviously, if the Republican candidate wins, it's going to mean a stronger majority in the Senate. But even if the Democrat wins, they still have the votes to confirm. All right. Pardon me. Democrats are threatening to fly to Washington and prevent a Senate vote on the Supreme Court nominee by lying down on the floor to block the entry to the Senate. Personally, I would just walk on top of them and I would wear spike heels, which I don't have, but I would buy them for the occasion here. Now, Matt Gaetz is out there saying if GOP Senators Murkowski and Collins refuse to vote for the nominee, they should lose their funding from the GOP. Funny, I think I've heard that someplace before. Far-left DC mob harasses Senator Lindsey Graham at 6 in the morning. They blast bullhorns, flash strobe lights, try to enter his yard. This gets into the area of the extra legal path to blocking the nomination. But Senator Lindsey Graham is saying, we have the votes to confirm the new judge before the election, and we're going to do it. Now, Newsweek attacked the Supreme Court nominee, Barrett, Amy Coney Barrett. They attacked her on the basis of her Christian faith here, and they ran a story, and somebody actually sent it to me, basically saying that a Catholic group Barrett is a member of was the inspiration for The Handmaid's Tale, which is this book, later a movie, later a TV series, that was about this religious dictatorship that took root here in the United States here. And it was based on a novel by Margaret Atwood. And Atwood said, no, that's not where the inspiration came from. So Newsweek was forced to issue a correction. And the correction reads, this article's headline originally stated, "The People of Praise inspired the Handmaid's Tale." The book's author, Margaret Atwood, has never specifically mentioned the group as being the inspiration for her work. A New Yorker profile of the author from 2017 mentions a newspaper clipping as part of her research for the book of a different charismatic Catholic group, the People of Hope. Newsweek regrets the error. But of course, they print those corrections way, way down where they're hard to see. And the headline is still out there and people are looking at that. Anyway, Caitlin Johnston is out there saying that Ginsburg death means the two-headed uniparty will threaten Americans with removal of civil rights. And U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg has died, which means the U.S. election is going to revolve around abortion and other civil rights for the foreseeable future, which won't change much since this presidential race hasn't really been about anything since the end of the Democratic primaries. The opportunistic galvanization process has already begun before Ginsburg's body is even cold, with liberal influencers calling on Democrats to rally to a November win for the notorious Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and Trump supporters dropping their faux anti-establishment shtick and metamorphosing into a bunch of mini Mitch McConnells. Leftists are being shrieked at by corporate Dems as they need to fall in line and support Biden, or they're personally responsible for every civil right that's taken away by Ginsburg's replacement. Okay. Democrats are threatening to impeach Trump if he fills the Supreme Court vacancy. Okay, and he actually made a joke at one of his rallies there saying he's going to be the only president impeached for doing his job as the Constitution lays it out. But the president is constitutionally obliged to nominate Bader Ginsburg, and he needs to do it quickly so the court can be ready to counter all the cheating that the left will try this November. So the Democrats are now thinking of trying to impeach President Trump again if he tries to push through a Supreme Court nominee this year. Given that he is obliged to fill such vacancies under Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution, that's like trying to impeach someone for doing their job properly. But Nancy Pelosi can't help but threaten him anyway. And it's going to get weird. Nancy Pelosi is out there saying we can impeach Trump every day of the week for anything he does. And Pelosi told Kara Swisher of the New York Times in an interview released Monday, the House of Representatives can impeach Donald Trump every day of the week for anything he does. Swisher, a tech journalist with left-wing views, was pushing Pelosi to commit to doing more to fight back against Trump, the Republicans, and the conservative agenda. Now, Donald Trump, on, again, one of his little rally speeches, dares Nancy Pelosi to try and impeach him a second time for filling the Supreme Court seat. Now, the first impeachment failed because they really didn't have anything. Impeachment is for high crimes and misdemeanor. And how are you going to impeach the president for doing the job the Constitution says he has to do? So Speaker Pelosi, who's obviously a critic of the president, was one of the key figures behind the original impeachment inquiry to Trump, which ended in his acquittal. U.S. President Donald Trump dared the speaker to impeach him a second time for his attempts to nominate a replacement for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. He said, "I'm the only guy in the world that could be impeached for filling a seat. Go ahead, I want them to do that." Over at Facebook, they're going to take exceptional measures to limit content if the U.S. election descends into violent chaos, warns Global Affairs head Nick Clegg. Now, Facebook is preparing to basically block posts, probably conservative ones, to restrict content if the U.S. election descends into chaos or violence. The site is thought to be planning for 70 possible scenarios, including military strategists. Measures include using artificial intelligence to track and remove dehumanizing content, limiting visibility of borderline posts, and shutting down fake or misleading accounts. Similar measures were used in Myanmar and Sri Lanka. Somebody came out with a ranking of the most democratic countries, and the United States was not at the top of the list. In fact, they were in the category of flawed democracies here. Thousands of supporters line up several hours ahead of President Trump's rallies in Ohio, and he was at 2 separate campaign events, and huge crowds. Trump supporters are also showing up for Biden's appearance, and they're outnumbering the Biden supporters. Judging by the attendance at these rallies, Trump is crushing Biden. And we had that same giveaway back in 2016 when Trump was filling these sports venues and Hillary Clinton was like talking to maybe 100 people at a bicycle store. And everybody said, no, Hillary's going to win. Hillary's going to win. The polls were saying Hillary was going to win. And Trump won. And it was a huge embarrassment for the polling organizations who are being a little more cautious, but still biased during this election season. Now, Democrats are in a panic mode as a new poll suggests substantial number of gay men plan on voting for President Donald Trump. And I think it was something like more than 1/3 of the respondents said they were going to vote for Trump. That is a major defection from the Democratic agenda here. All righty. Now, over in Wisconsin, a judge has ruled that absentee ballots can be counted up to 6 days after the election, meaning there will be a huge delay in getting a final result. Now, the judge is saying they have to be postmarked by election day, but as I commented earlier on the same issue, postmarks are not proof against forgery. They're not. Nobody's ever thought that you'd have to fake a postmark, and so there's no protection built into the system. Now, with only, I think it's 39, 38 days until the election, the window of opportunity to get to the bottom of the U.S. government's intelligence gathering on Trump's 2016 campaign is quickly closing. The best hope for transparency lies in a handful of Senate committees and U.S. Attorney John Durham, who are all conducting investigations into FBI, CIA, and other government agencies' Trump-related activities. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Durham is another gatekeeper. He's another fake. The system never eats its own. All right, we're going to talk about Jake Gardner here. Now, Jake Gardner was this Nebraska bar owner who defended himself in the bar and shot dead a George Floyd protester last May. Now, it was originally ruled self-defense. And there was a huge outcry and public pressure was brought to bear, and he was charged for manslaughter, and he wound up committing suicide. And the body of Jake Gardner, 38 years old, of Omaha, was found around 12:20 p.m. outside a medical clinic in Hillsboro, Oregon, some 20 miles west of Portland. His lawyer said that Gardner left Nebraska for the West Coast shortly after the shooting during death threats. Facebook, again, is censoring posts that accurately describe wildfires linked to arrests of arsonists. Yesterday, we posted this entire list of all the people who had been arrested for arson on the West Coast. So it's definitely some of those fires were started by arsonists, firebugs we used to call them when I was a kid. And Facebook is censoring it because the official story is it's all global warming. It's global warming. It's the fault of all of you for not passing the Green New Deal. So Facebook has announced it will be removing all posts linking the wildfires sweeping through the West Coast to arsonists after the FBI brushed off the reports as nothing but baseless theories. They're not baseless theories. They're reports from the police departments. We had this one, I think it was a deputy sheriff, made a video saying, yes, we are arresting arsonists. We are finding this. There was that Zoom meeting from the Clackamas County county commissioners where they had a report that gas cans were being stockpiled. Julian Assange is in the news again. He's in the middle of his extradition hearing over in Great Britain. And Slavoj Zizek, is saying the treatment of Assange is an assault on everyone's personal freedoms. Julian Assange has had his rights stripped away in a case that should alarm millions, but too few people care because his character has been assassinated. He might have to go to prison before he gets the support he deserves. There's an old joke from the time of World War I about an exchange of telegrams between the German army headquarters and the Austrian-Hungarian HQ. From Berlin to Vienna, the message is, the situation on our part of the front is serious but not catastrophic. And the reply from Vienna is, with us, the situation is catastrophic but not serious. The reply from Vienna seems to offer a model for how we react to crises today. From COVID-19 to the forest fires to Tropical Storm Beta. Yeah, we know a catastrophe is pending. Media warn us all the time, but somehow we're not ready to take the situation seriously. We should be taking the situation with Julian Assange seriously because that will be the nose under the camel's tent for the eventual destruction of the independent media. Now, under the Espionage Act, a journalist can be charged if they solicit the release of classified information. If it is simply leaked to them, the way the Pentagon Papers were, then they're protected by the protections of the press. And that's what the Supreme Court ruled in the Pentagon Papers case here. But a group of over 160 and former politicians endorsed a letter that demands the British government release Julian Assange immediately. The publisher is currently fighting extradition to the U.S. at the Old Bailey. He could face 175 years in prison for exposing U.S. war crimes. Now, presidents, ex-presidents, and political leaders have added their names to that growing list calling for an end to the Assange persecution. Argentinian President Alberto Fernandez, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro have added their names to an open letter to the British government calling for an end to Assange's persecution. The message has now been signed by 167 ministers, former heads of states, current head of states, members of parliament. It's addressed to Prime Minister Boris Johnson and warns Britain against violating domestic, international, and human rights law. What is really alarming is that corporate U.S. reporters are silent about the fact that they themselves are being spied on by the apparent CIA contractor that targeted Assange. Despite being spied on and having their privacy invaded by UC Global firm that targeted Assange, reporters from major corporate U.S. news outlets have said nothing in protest. Meanwhile, new evidence of that firm's CIA links has emerged. A Spanish security firm apparently contracted by U.S. intelligence to carry out a campaign of black operations against Assange spied on several U.S. reporters, including Ellen Nakashima, the top national security reporter of the Washington Post, and Lowell Bergman, a New York Times and PBS veteran. Okay, yesterday we had a caller call on in about the Emmys and how lackadaisical it was, and I said I didn't have the numbers at that point. Well, the numbers are in. The Emmy ratings dropped to an all-time low. In fact, it's an all-time low for any major Hollywood awards show. 6.1 million viewers. That is an epic fail. So, you know, they aired virtually Sunday night with no live audience in Los Angeles. And I think it's just people are getting tired of the Hollywood culture because they've gone out on the far left liberal fringe. And, you know, I miss working in the industry, but there's a part of me that's glad I'm not, you know, mired in that anymore because I wasn't willing to go along with a lot of that, which was one of the reasons I got, you know, kicked out. All right, let's talk about COVID-19 here. CDC the other day put out a new guidance saying that coronavirus spreads through the air. Now they've backtracked and say they mistakenly published the guidance that the novel coronavirus spreads through the air was posted in error. Now, the World Health Organization is saying it spreads through the air, but the CDC backed off. Over in India, the COVID-19 tally surges past 5.4 million. It's an unprecedented level in India. The country now has the second highest coronavirus caseload in the world after the United States. Okay, we're going to take a break here for commercials, and we'll be back with more news after these few words. And welcome back to our show here. And I want to start off first with a heartfelt thank you to those of you who have been donating to Republic Broadcasting Network. I'd love to be able to say that it's enough and you can stop, but I can't, in all honesty. We still need your help. And so this appeal is specifically to those of you who have not yet donated to Republic Broadcasting to keep us doing what we're doing here, because there are a lot of costs involved with this. There's networking fees and rent on the office space and the constant having to replace equipment that's wearing out. So please, forget the pizza this weekend and instead send the money in to Republic Broadcasting here, because we won't fatten you the way the pizza will. So the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. The network thanks you. Okay, we're talking about the COVID-19. And I'm looking at this article that came out of Investment Watch blog. Public health experts are suggesting the mask wearing is going to be permanent. Many public health officials have stated that the new normal of muzzling oneself in public could be permanent, meaning we'll all be wearing masks forever. Even with the vaccine, apparently they want the faces of the public masked and dehumanized. Well, maybe that'll work. Maybe it won't, because all of a sudden, I don't know if you've seen the commercials on TV, there are these new face coverings that are clear plastic. You wear them around the neck and you flip this little plastic up and it's, basically a splash screen, if you will. They even have them on the shelf at the local supermarket, and it allows your face to be seen. And I think those are going to start being very, very popular indeed, because you don't have a lot of the problems that you have with the masks. And certainly a solid plastic shield is going to be less permeable to the viral particles than a cloth mask. Those cloth masks are like trying to stop mosquitoes with a chain link fence. Okay, the British government's Operation Moonshot, which seeks to make access to travel, theater, sports, and other events dependent on endless COVID tests, is a hideously expensive, unnecessary, and illiberal scheme that needs to be ditched. This is Boris Johnson's little child here. You can do an awful lot with $127 billion. If you were a smoker, you could puff your way quite happily through the world's most expensive cigars without any worry about the cost. If you were a fast car enthusiast, you could it would buy you quite a few Ferraris. If you were a government, you could build over 100 new hospitals and employ a large number of new doctors and nurses to work in them. In fact, $127 billion is only $19 billion short of the entire budget given to the National Health Service England in 2018-2019. Okay. All righty, Dan Andrews Stasi down in Victoria. The Premier is under fire for a proposed law that would allow government officials to arbitrarily arrest citizens. Civil liberties groups are sounding the alarm in the Australian state of Victoria over the proposed Omnibus Emergency Measures Bill, which would afford government officials the power to arrest citizens who haven't committed any crimes. It's basically pre-crime, okay? Would allow the government officials to arrest people they suspect may spread coronavirus through planned future action, such as anti-lockdown protesters. Public servants, union officials, or any other government staff, such as protective service officers and WorkSafe inspectors, could be drafted to enforce public health directions pertaining to the coronavirus pandemic should the bill pass the upper house of Parliament in the state. It's getting really ugly down there. Over in Melbourne, police surround and arrest two elderly women for resting on a park bench as a COVID violation. One Australian eyewitness posted a video showing police telling a 38-week pregnant woman she can't sit down due to coronavirus and social distancing enforcement measures. So apparently you can only be out of your house for one of four reasons. And the cops who arrested those two elderly women said, one of those reasons would be exercise. Sitting in a park is not one of the four reasons. Boy, that really is draconian. Australia was a lot nicer when I was working down there. Over in Washington, D.C., they've got a new program that would help restaurants winterize and maintain outdoor dining areas by turning them into indoor dining areas in heated tents. Well, that sounds like an idea a politician would come up with, but let me ask you a simple question here. What's the difference between an indoor dining area and an outdoor dining area surrounded by a tent in terms of potential coronavirus infections? But in cities across the U.S., restaurant owners are working to find any way they can stay in business, and a lot of them have gone out of business. They're not going to recover. A lot of these retail establishments failed to make their August mortgage payments. Okay. The CDC has now officially labeled trick-or-treating high risk for spreading COVID-19. I wonder what they're going to do when Christmas comes around here. Is Santa Claus carrying COVID-19? Okay, we got to take another break. Commercials, and we will be right back. And welcome back to our show here. The phone lines are closed. We're going to open them at the end of this segment, but I really do have a lot of news I need to get through here today. We're still talking about COVID-19. New Yorkers are calling for Bill de Blasio to resign for his sudden change. He was going to let all the students go back to school in the immediate future here, and then all of a sudden he changed that. The return to school is for just pre-kindergarten and some special education students. This was a last-minute decision to postpone in-person classes for a second time. Okay, now then, over in Scotland, families may have to stay in touch using video calls this Christmas, according to Nicola Sturgeon. Thank goodness for FaceTime. What can I tell you here? All righty. Nigel Farage is out there with an article saying, for Britain's sake, we need to fight this lockdown tyranny. And he says, while I supported an initial shutdown in March this year in order for us to come up with a plan to deal with COVID-19, it is increasingly clear that we must find a way to live with this virus. Just think already of the tens of thousands of cancer diagnoses that have not taken place, or the numbers with chronic heart conditions that haven't been treated. And goodness knows what the impact of suicides, domestic violence, and the mental health of millions of people will be. We simply cannot afford as a nation to go through this again. What really struck me is the way in which this conservative government, using their emergency powers, have been so keen to interfere in our day-to-day lives since the pandemic began. Being put under virtual house arrest for weeks was bad enough. Now, normal people are being threatened with fines of up to £10,000 if they do not do as they are told. Gaza is facing a humanitarian disaster amid acute shortage of medical supplies and handling COVID-19. This according to the health ministry in the Gaza Strip. They announced on Monday that Gaza would soon witness this humanitarian disaster because of the shortage of medical supplies and equipment. The densely populated coastal enclave needs to double the PCR test to combat the virus. The pandemic is straining Rafah's health services. And there's a story in there about somebody who came down with COVID-19, had to be transferred to a different hospital, and wasn't even admitted until midnight. The beds are completely full over there. All righty, out in California, parents have filed a lawsuit to force the schools to fully reopen as students struggle with distance learning. Do you know how unfair this is to college kids? I mean, they're going hideously into debt, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, to sit at home and watch a class over a little tiny computer screen. I don't think that was exactly what they expected when they signed up there. Speaking of college, apparently one of the online-only students who's never actually on campus was suspended indefinitely for attending a party. Now, the party was consistent with New York City's Phase 4 COVID-19 guidelines, which allow events of up to 50 people. Many attendees went maskless, but Andy says he didn't stand in close proximity to anyone other than his roommates, who are also students, and they left after a short while. But apparently somebody posted a video of the party on social media, and it was reported to NYU administrators by the university's COVID-19 compliance system. On Sunday, August 23rd, a day after the party, the NYU Director of Student Conduct, Craig Jolie, sent an email to Andy accusing him of threatening the health and safety of the NYU community. Now, remember, this guy's never actually on campus. He's a remote learner. Monday, the NYU suspended him indefinitely, and says that to return to campus in 2021, he'll need to write a reflection paper and beg for readmission. The problem is he's on a full tuition scholarship that could be ended because of the disciplinary status. That is definitely not fair. Okay, in a recent report, Washington-based consumer watchdog group Public Citizen accused Amazon of price gouging, the practice of raising prices of basic necessities during disasters amid the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. The report itself featured a long list of essential products that were being sold at inflated prices. For example, a box of 50 disposable face masks listed on the platform's own essentials line now retails for $39.99. This is a 1,000% increase from its designated price back in 2019. Cornstarch, another household essential, saw a 1,010% increase in price, the highest among the limited essential products listed essential products in the report. Sugar and toilet paper were being sold at a 520% markup, while sanitizing products saw an almost 500% increase in price. And by the way, over in Europe, as they keep hearing about the second wave, again, there's a run on toilet paper in the markets there. And people say, don't stockpile. You don't need to. They're going to keep the supply chains going here. All right, turning to the protests and discord in the streets of America here. Bill Barr's Justice Department brands New York, Portland, and Seattle as anarchist jurisdictions. They now face losing billions of federal dollars for failing to maintain law and order. The idea, of course, being that the city government's first priority is the safety of their own citizenry. And the Justice Department declared these three cities as anarchist jurisdictions, and they can have federal funding ripped away for failing to clamp down on the violence. It listed the three cities as among those that have permitted violence and destruction of property to persist and have refused to undertake reasonable measures to counteract criminal activity. I mean, even Joe Biden is finally out there saying that this is criminal activity that's going on in these streets here. It's not mostly peaceful protesting. There's an article here that came out of Russia Today talking about the Orwellian indoctrination of kindergartners with critical race theory. Woke teachers and school administrators are waging a culture war for the minds of kids as young as 5 by inculcating them with toxic social justice teachings. And the author says that they got an unpleasant initiation into the culture war when, in the wake of the George Floyd killing, my 5-year-old child's elementary middle public charter school here in Los Angeles went from being an academic institution interested in preparing students for the workplace and college to an ideological hotbed devoted to promoting critical race theory over all other subjects. Okay. Apparently, protesters in Philadelphia are chasing down and assaulting random citizens for being Nazis. And just as we thought we'd seen the peak boredom from America's misinformed Marxists, 3 new videos out of Philadelphia have surfaced showing that now more than ever, there's too many art students and unemployed millennials that need to find hobbies. This is good news here. GOP lawmakers introduce Hold Rioters Accountable Act. Pelosi, Democrats, and George Soros hit the hardest. For months now, violent Black Lives Matter and Antifa leftists have been rioting in cities across the country, and they have been allowed to basically do what they wanted to do. All righty, getting on over to the Breonna Taylor case here. Kentucky police initiate state of emergency ahead of grand jury decision on the Breonna Taylor case. The Louisville Metropolitan Police Department ordered a state of emergency on Monday for Louisville, Kentucky, ahead of a highly anticipated grand jury decision on the Breonna Taylor case. I understand they're boarding up buildings over there. And frankly, I think they're telegraphing which way the grand jury is going to go. And, this is getting close. I mean, Louisville's just a hoot and a holler over that away here. So in the LMPD declaration, personnel were informed that all officers would be required to be present and would not be allowed to take time off in the coming days. All right, the Southern Baptist Convention is going to rename itself in a nod to Black Lives Matter. The group's president citing the ongoing Black Lives Matter riot movement as an imperative for the change. And the resolution to adopt a new name passed following a vote of church leaders, although it's unclear how they perceive the name Southern Baptist Convention as an insult to the Black Lives Matter movement. Okay. And still following up here, there's been yet another affirmative action fraud exposed. A graduate student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison has resigned from a teaching position after admitting on social media that they falsely claimed to be a person of color. Okay, CV Vitolo Haddad apologized last week in 2 posts on Medium and announced that they were leaving their position as the co-president of the university's Teaching Assistants Association. Okay, the apologies came after an anonymous post on Medium accused Vitolo Haddad of misleading people about his racial identity. Okay, the second police officer that shot in Compton has been released from the hospital, and apparently she got a phone call from Donald Trump, who told her the country was behind her, which I think is absolutely true. But it's great they're both out of the hospital now, although they'll be bearing the scars of what happened for the rest of their lives, both mental and physical. All right, let's turn to the international news now. There's a lot going on there. Mike Pompeo is talking about a humanitarian intervention in Latin America. Of course, we never start wars for greedy reasons. It's always humanitarian intervention or bringing them democracy or saving them from a cruel dictator. The U.S. government never admits, well, we're just going to go on and take, their natural resources here. But the United States and its longtime puppet state, Colombia, are moving towards another attempt for regime change against Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's Latin American tour, which included Colombia, Brazil, Guyana, and Suriname, all share borders with Venezuela. And it was a display of the U.S. flaunting its economic and military muscle to shape its Latin American policy for its economic and geopolitical advantage in the region. Pompeo's press statement began, the United States remains the largest single donor of humanitarian and development assistance around the world, including for Venezuelans in need, because doing our part to respond to global crisis situations is a national security priority. I wonder if they're going to invade before the election here. Over in Afghanistan, the Afghan government said yesterday that at least 57 Afghan soldiers were killed in overnight clashes with the Taliban, the bloodiest day of fighting since intra-Afghan talks began in Doha earlier this month. The Taliban has not confirmed any casualties, but an Afghan military spokesman said 54 Taliban fighters were killed in Kunduz, Takhar, and Baghlan provinces. A spokesman from the local government of Maidan Ward province said 26 Taliban members were killed there, bringing the total to 80. The Afghan government took the heaviest casualties in the central province of Uruzgan, where at least 24 Afghan soldiers were killed. Okay, China is signaling a war footing. Chinese minesweepers were in a drill to break the Taiwan sea mines threat. State media has confirmed what is a very serious and direct escalation in waters surrounding Taiwan amid the ongoing PLA military exercises. PLA ships were engaged in mock minesweeping activities amid Taiwan's attempt to deploy sea mines in the Taiwan Straits, although it's unclear the degree to which China's minesweeping ships actually entered the contested strait. Taiwan says it has the right to retaliate after China sent its military planes into the sensitive strait area 40 times in a deliberate threat of force. And Taiwan's defense minister is out there saying that the island has a right to defend itself. They're not afraid of China, but they will not provoke a confrontation. So the ball's in China's court on this one. All right, as you're already aware, the Trump administration has unilaterally imposed the UN sanctions on Iran without the blessings of the United Nations. And yesterday, the Trump administration announced new sanctions on Iran under the guise of enforcing stipulations of the 2015 nuclear deal, an agreement the U.S. withdrew from in 2018. The U.S. is taking these steps unilaterally with virtually no international support. The move is not only rejected by the UN Security Council, but also by key European allies like Britain, Germany, and France. President Trump signed an executive order yesterday that is meant to replace a UN arms embargo on Iran that will expire in October. The executive order allows the U.S. to impose sanctions on any individual or entity that sells weapons to Iran. This is going to worsen the trade war with China. And they're saying that the anti-Iranian sanctions won't change much when it comes to the Islamic Republic's present economic predicament, but will almost certainly provoke a worsening of the trade war with China, since the real intent seems to be to target the countless companies that are poised to participate in these two countries' reported $400 billion strategic partnership agreement by replicating the model of maximum pressure that's been experimented against Huawei over the past year. Now, an American analyst, Patrick Lawrence, is saying that a U.S. blockade of Iran, which is being talked about, would be an act of war. And Lawrence is saying the U.S. should not try to blockade the Islamic Republic in order to enforce illegal sanctions unilaterally, because blockades are acts of war. For the first time in 10 months, last week, a U.S. aircraft carrier sailed through the Strait of Hormuz and entered into the waters of the Persian Gulf after Washington threatened to illegally extend an expiring arms embargo on Iran. The U.S. Fifth Fleet said in a statement on Friday that the strike group led by the USS Nimitz, and including 2 guided missile cruisers and a guided missile destroyer, sailed into the Persian Gulf to operate and train with U.S. partners. The Nimitz strike group includes the USS Princeton and USS Philippine Sea, both guided missile cruisers, and the guided missile destroyer USS Sterett. Now, Iran yesterday, through Foreign Minister Javad Zarif, made a video address to the Council of Foreign Relations in New York, during which he proposed a full exchange of prisoners held by the U.S. and Iranian governments. It's unclear how many prisoners this would cover, but Zarif said the offer was to exchange all prisoners, adding that there are Iranians in U.S. prisoners who are only there because they refuse to betray their country. Iran has some U.S. citizens in prison on espionage charges, while mostly the Iranians held by the U.S. are facing allegations of violating sanctions. The U.S. has often demanded the unconditional release of all Americans held. Now, such releases are not unheard of. In December of 2018, the U.S. and Iran traded a pair of prisoners, and in June, Iran released a Navy veteran who had contracted COVID-19 in return for the U.S. allowing an Iranian-American doctor to visit Iran. Now, right now, the United States is concerned about Iran and North Korean cooperation, and they want to try and find some way to prevent it. And according to Elliot Abrams, Washington's envoy in Iran, the U.S. will do whatever it can to prevent it. Abrams was responding to a reporter's question on whether the United States had seen evidence that Tehran and Pyongyang had resumed cooperation on long-range missile development. There's a new United Nations report out, and it offers a grim reminder of U.S. complicity in the brutal war in Yemen. And if you want a graphic example of how U.S. intervention can very often make the situation worse, look no further than Yemen. Okay, we're going to go ahead and open the phone lines now, 800-313-9443, and we'll start taking phone calls after these words from our sponsors. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to go to David in Boston. Hello, David. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Michael, getting back onto former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. I talked about him a little bit yesterday, but Michael, evidently there's a general gross misperception by the public about former officer Chauvin. It's leaking out, Michael, like with his defense team, when he goes to trial, evidently his defense team is going to put forth this sort of a defense. I don't know if the jury's going to buy it, but evidently former officer Chauvin, he loves black folks. And he saw that all around the country in the blue cities that the police were taking the knee with the Black Lives Matter folks and everything to show their solidarity with them and so on. So evidently, former officer Chauvin, to show his solidarity with Colin Kaepernick and the Black Lives Matter movement, he was taking a knee. He was simply taking a knee, and he was trying to save George Floyd.
Oh, David, that's a bit of a reach.
Oh, really? You don't
Yes.
think the jury will buy that? You don't
I
think
don't.
the jury will
I
buy
wouldn't buy it, and I don't think the jury will buy that.
Oh, okay. I don't know. Apparently, he had altruistic motives. He was just taking a knee, trying to say.
Yeah.
Now, and Mike, and then this other topic with this Ruth Bader Meinhof. That's what I call her. But
Yeah.
these young college girls and everything. The woods is full of them back here. You won't see the system educating a young white man, but all these young white women, I mean, going to college and everything nowadays. The last thing they're concerned about, of course, is finding a nice husband and having some beautiful children or anything. But anyways, they're going around, and you probably heard this, of course, Mike, that you can't spell truth without Ruth. Everybody's, I guess, heard that. You've heard that,
Yes.
right? Yeah, you can't spell truth without Ruth, but. I don't have a black belt in karate, and I don't have a black belt in judo. However, I do have a black belt in jiu-jitsu. I'm a jiu-jitsu master. So I usually come up with an answer for all these platitudes and everything. But my answer, Mike, actually, I tried this on some young college girls, and one of them flipped me off, and then the others joined in flipping me off when the first one flipped me off. But I told them I was old school and everything, and I'm a red-blooded American, and I told them that maybe you can't spell truth without Ruth, but you can't spell Babe Ruth without Ruth either. So the answer to the young Americans, us Americans, red-blooded Americans, when they throw that in our face that you can't spell truth without Ruth, just come back and tell them, yeah, but I'm old school and I don't spell Babe Ruth.
Okay, David, we're going to have to let you go. We got to take a break for station identification. Got more callers waiting on the line, and we will be right back. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to go to Joe in Tennessee. Hello, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike. I was reading there that Limbaugh thinks they should not even have hearings and just go right to a vote. I heard that. I think that's like giving into him. And the other thing is, I think the theatrics of like the Kavanaugh theory with the transsexuals getting up and screaming and the audience, as long as it doesn't get too out of hand where it doesn't totally obstruct it, I think it's the best thing going for the Republicans and whoever the nominee is to have hysterical, crazed leftists making spectacles of themselves, and it's an embarrassment to the Democrats. I mean, I think that the way the Kavanaugh hearing plays out, I'd love to see it happen all over again with a little bit of Feinstein saying the dogma is strong in this one. Did you hear? That's what she said to that Barrett before when she was up for appeals court. I mean, to think that a Jewish senator would have the chutzpah to say something like that, the dogma. I mean, how insulting that is to Catholics. And I hope she says it again, just because that's where her heart is. Let the people see it. And that's what I want from these whole hearings is the exposure. The other thing I find funny, and in a way, I called last week and I told you about Bill White, how in Toledo his march against black crime caused the blacks to burn Toledo down. And I'm seeing the same thing with these Democrats saying, we'll burn it to the ground. We'll tear these institutions. And personally, I'm sitting back and going, go ahead. And I'm wondering if, if they're going to do it, I'm not saying I want to burn these institutions to the ground, but I'm no big fan of big government. These institutions are just used by Zionist big money and corporate big money. I'm a little guy who's been, as a white Christian, I'm demonized, a straight white Christian, I'm demonized by my government. So the liberals, the same people that are screaming to burn the government to the ground, are the ones that benefit by government. They're the government party. So go ahead. It's kind of like Bill White turned around, like, okay, let's show the country, the rest of the country. And meanwhile, you're burning down institutions that I don't have any faith in anyway. Go ahead, have at it. I'm not saying I'm going to be any part of it, but I'm going to sit back and watch it You know, like I said, these institutions are the same institutions that, throw affirmative action in our face. And they're the same, like, FBI and stuff that comes and, and harasses and tries to entrap white people, yet fund and protect Antifa and their rioters, which is more and more of that is coming out every day. So why should I care? I mean, I hope that these protesters, besides protesting out in front of the Supreme Court, somehow or another they tie it into the FBI and they can go be a nuisance on the FBI also, So I think this is really going to be fun, and I don't agree with Limbaugh. One quick comment. I was listening to Alex Jones, and a friend of mine mentioned something about how Alex always blames the Chinese instead of the Jews. So whenever Alex blamed the Chinese today, I substituted in my mind Jews, and it worked. It was like a secret decoder ring. And it is kind of funny when you listen to Alex to kind of do that switcheroo, and maybe it's something he's doing on purpose. I don't know, or but it definitely applies. So that's kind of an interesting thing. So once again, I'm really going to enjoy this whole thing. This whole Ruth thing couldn't have happened at a better time, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, let's just watch them all go crazy,
I agree.
And it's the exposure. We're going to see where everybody is, and let's see that. I mean, it's for the education of the American people. And then when the people get educated, we can move them on. We can move them to relook at 9/11 and look at some of these other things once they come out of that bubble. So anyway, but I'll leave it at that. And thanks for letting me vent. Appreciate it.
Not a problem, Joe. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch to Al in Canada. Hello, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. 9/11's never going to be looked at, honestly. So we
look at it, and we know we were lied to, and that's all we really need to care about.
Yeah. And as far as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I sent you a video of this woman driving a car freaking out.
Yeah, I just posted it to what really happened.
Jesus, what a freak show!
Yes.
I can't imagine losing my mind like that over anything, except maybe, I just got told I've got 6 months to live or something.
Yeah.
So, I sent you another link too of the state-sponsored propaganda site up here in Canada, CBC, and so they're saying that. Well, I'll read it. Federal health officials presented new modeling today that shows the epidemic is accelerating nationally. Is that based upon that Ferguson model?
I have no idea, but again, I mean, there are people who want to tamp things down and keep people calm, and there are others who are trying to exploit the coronavirus and keep the fear level up.
Well, this is obviously keeping the fear level up. Now, once again, in that link, so we have Dr. Tam. She used to work for the WHO, so she's been sucking on taxpayers' teeth her whole life. And then we have this other lady here, Patty. She's a minister of health, and she's an interior designer, Mike.
Okay. Good qualification.
Like, serious. She is an interior designer. So, can you say anything wrong? This is such a joke. You got to be
a joke.
You got to be grade 1 not to see this. It is so obvious. And then, of course, we have the parliament's been prorogued. We have the prime minister is hiding. His wife left him, right? Because you remember just before the election up here, especially in the United States, they're running that story where he was banging his students out west when he was a teacher out there, and they fired him for it. So, I mean, I said that to people. They don't believe me. And, just look in the news. They split up. Why do you think they split up? The guy's rotten. And this guy's running the country. Well, the bankers are, but I mean, like, he's the prime minister. So come on, you can't be serious. It's a joke. And then we have this guy, Doug Ford, in Ontario. And the first thing he should have done in this province was just disassembled, just shredded up the teachers union, because that union has enough power to take this province down economically, and it's disgusting. They have so much power up here, Mike, just like a lot of teachers unions have a lot of power in the States and the United States. What are they here for? Are they here to run the economy or to teach students? Pick one. It's stick with it.
Well, they should be there to teach the students here, but the problem with unionizing the teachers is they took a profession and turned it into a trade.
Well, yeah, they did, because I don't know how it works in the States, but this has been going on up here in Canada for a long time now. That so basically you get a BA in sociology or poli-sci, and then you go for 2 years at teachers college, and now you're a teacher. So you're teaching our kids in grade 8 math, and they can't. They're using their fingers to do it.
Yeah.
You know, it's a joke. It's disgraceful. When I was a kid, the public teachers that I had, you know, had an MA in something and a BA in something else. You know, they didn't have this poli-sci and sociology nonsense that you can basically learn online. You can learn this stuff online.
Yes.
You don't have to go to a university to learn this nonsense. It's just memorizing stuff. There's no critical thinking involved. It's disgusting. And it's no wonder kids are so, you know, I'm going to say stupid. They're uneducated and they can't critically think. So, and then of course you got this nonsense on the CBC posting this crapola with computer modeling shows that, you know, there's going to be spiking. Oh, stop it. You know, I'm not in grade 2. I can see through this nonsense. I'm starting to rant. I'm sorry, Mike.
Well, it's okay. This is a time when people tend to rant.
Yeah, but you know, if you posted that YouTube video of that lady in the car losing her mind, I hope that everyone's listening watches it, because it is so funny.
It's right at the top of the front page right now.
It's unbelievable. Thanks a lot for your time, Mike. You have a good show. I'll be watching or listening and watching. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Turning back to the international news, this past weekend, Russian state television on 2 major channels devoted substantial segments to review programs, to the ongoing game of chicken that the United States is carrying on in the air and on the seas at Russia's borders, on the Black Sea, the Baltic Sea, the Barents, and the Okhotsk seas in the Far East. From the north, from the south, from the east and west, U.S. warplanes are simultaneously being directed against Russian defenses to probe their effectiveness and score political points. Tremendous brinksmanship. Over in Palestine, Hamas has set a 2-month deadline for Israel to end the Gaza siege. The Palestinian resistance movement, Hamas, has set a deadline of 2 months for Israel to end more than 12 years of its siege on the Gaza Strip. Khalil al-Hayya, a member of the political bureau of Hamas, said Israel had blocked humanitarian assistance from entering Gaza over the past few months of the coronavirus pandemic. We talked about that a little earlier in the show. If Israel does not end the siege willingly, he warned, Hamas is militarily capable of forcing Israelis into shelters. Sounds like it's going to get serious there as well. The whole world just seems ready to go to war here. Now, over in Iraq, Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr says Israel will mark its own ending by opening its embassy in Iraq amid some reports about Tel Aviv considering opening its virtual diplomatic mission in the Arab country. The prominent Shia cleric made the comment during a sermon at Friday prayers, warning the enemy of God, meaning Netanyahu, who has evil intentions toward Iraq, about possible coming to the Arab country or even thinking about establishing an embassy there. Sadr's warning was apparently a reaction to some unconfirmed reports that Tel Aviv is seeking to establish a virtual embassy in Baghdad, which in turn allegedly wants to open its own in Israel. Addressing the Israeli premier, Sadr further warned that if he took such actions, he would mark the end of the occupying entity, according to the Holy Quran. All righty, now then, the U.S. Space Force, newly formed, is deploying troops to a vast new frontier, the Arabian Peninsula. Space Force now has a squadron of 20 airmen stationed at Qatar's Al Udeid Air Base in its first foreign deployment. The force pushed by Donald Trump represents the sixth branch of the U.S. military and the first new military service since the creation of the Air Force in 1947. It has provoked skepticism in Congress, satire on Netflix, and with its uncannily similar logo, Star Trek jokes about intergalactic battles. Future wars may be waged in outer space, but the Arabian Desert already saw what military experts dubbed the world's first space war, the 1991 Desert Stormer operation to drive Iraqi forces from Kuwait. Today, the U.S. faces new threats in the region from Iran's missile program and efforts to jam, hack, and blind satellites. Okay, a Russian missile guru, the creator of Russia's avant-garde hypersonic glider, is ridiculing President Trump for claiming Moscow stole the technology from the Obama administration, saying that when they started their experiments in hypersonic weaponry, Obama was still in school. And this is from Gerbert Yefremov, a renowned engineer who played a key role in designing the avant-garde. He said, Barack Obama became U.S. president in 2009. Our experiments with these types of things began in Soviet times when Obama was still a teenager. He was still a schoolboy when we were experimenting with hypersonic tech. This is an 87-year-old man. He's been around for a while here. All righty. Interesting little speculative article from Global Research up in Canada, and they do some very serious work. Now, they're talking about the poisoning of Alexei Navalny, who we are told is up and about, which again is kind of a head scratcher because Novichok is supposed to be so lethal. So this article is saying it's likelier that the U.S. government had Navalny poisoned because it's an immense propaganda asset to the U.S. to bash Russia. The poisoning of Navalny has created intensified support by pro-U.S. and especially pro-NATO officials in the European Union to block the nearly completed Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline from Russia to Germany and to import into the EU instead far costlier United States liquefied natural gas. A very real possibility thus now exists. The poisoning of Navalny will turn out to have been worth many billions of dollars to U.S. fracking interests by causing the nearly completed Nord Stream 2 to be turned to waste so that fracked U.S. liquefied natural gas will sell in Europe. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, talk about the economic news now. Banks defy U.S. crackdowns by continuing to serve oligarchs, criminals, and terrorists. Now, they had a moderately good day on the stock market. They recovered some of the losses from yesterday, which was all being blamed on the delay of a new coronavirus stimulus package. But there are all these scandals that are erupting, like JP Morgan Chase, HSBC, other big banks that have been caught laundering money in huge, huge volumes. And that is starting to pull down on the bank stocks as well. So secret U.S. government documents reveal that JP Morgan Chase, HSBC, and other big banks have defied money laundering crackdowns by moving staggering sums of illicit cash for shadowy characters and criminal networks that have spread chaos and undermined democracy around the world. The records show 5 global banks, JP Morgan, HSBC, Standard Chartered Bank, Deutsche Bank, and Bank of New York Mellon, kept profiting from powerful and dangerous players even after U.S. authorities fined those financial institutions for earlier failures to stem flows of dirty money. U.S. agencies responsible for enforcing money laundering laws rarely prosecute mega banks that break the law, and the actions authorities do take barely ripple the flood of plundered money that washes through the international financial system. Okay, Whitbread is going to cut 6,000 jobs as hotel demand slumps. Whitbread owns Premier Inn and Beefeater, and they're saying that 6,000 of their staff could lose their jobs. The company blamed the cuts on a slump in hotel guest numbers since coronavirus. It comes as the government's furlough scheme, which still pays 27,000 Whitbread staff, ends next month. Meanwhile, pub chain J.D. Wetherspoon has warned its 1,000 staff who work at airport venues that almost half of them could lose their jobs because of the dramatic fall in travel and tourism. Shell is looking to cut their upstream oil operations by 40%. Okay, in other miscellaneous news and computers and whatnot, apparently TikTok stars are starting a new trend where people are grinding down their teeth with nail files to create a symmetrical smile. And dentists are warning they're doing irreparable damage and destruction to their own teeth. There's a lot of very dangerous and stupid things out there on social media, and people will do it because they want their 15 minutes of fame here. All righty, we have another caller waiting on the line. Let's go to Mark in Nova Scotia. Hello, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Bye-bye.
Mark, there you are.
Okay. I have a couple of ideas, maybe for you to consider to maybe able help you increase your revenue and grow what really happened. Are you interested?
Sure.
On your YouTube channel, do you have links to T-shirts, hats, memorabilia?
We have an online store over at Cafe Press, which is linked from the main page. I haven't put the links on the YouTube videos, and I probably ought to.
Yes. Well, I think so, because like if you have all the information on your channel, like just in my opinion, right?
Yes.
Where you can donate, places where you can get your memorabilia and stuff. When people come to your channel, like you have like 100, 150 people that follow you live, and by the end of your show, you average about 600 views. You have 21,000 subs, right?
Yes.
People come there, and if it's right there visually, very easily to access, I think people would access it so much quicker.
That's a very good idea. That's a very good idea. One of my weaknesses is that I do this for altruistic reasons, and I don't devote enough time and thought to increasing our revenue. Mark, stay on the line. I'm going to keep you through this commercial break and hear the rest of your suggestions after these few words. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Mark in Nova Scotia, who's got some suggestions for improving revenue generation for whatreallyhappened.com. And Mark, if you could regale us with your next suggestion.
Okay, I got a couple of them, Mike, and thank you, and I sure will, because if you succeed, we succeed.
Well, thank you.
You know, like, you know, when you're advertising, if you did like a flashcard visual, you know, like in between and how whatever particularly you're advertising, whether it be a product, a hat, shirt, cup, pull it up physically during your conversation, and when you're describing where to donate to and how you can donate to, I think that if you added your personal address, I think people would send you cash, gifts, whatever, right to you, and they would love to do that for you. You know what I'm saying? So if you had this while you were talking about and explaining these things, and it was visually right there, it would be in their mind as you're saying it, right? And it would stick. You know what I'm saying?
That's a very good idea. I'll have to talk to the person who handles our video for us to see if that could be done without causing a lot of grief, as it were.
Okay, would you like another idea?
Let's have one more, and then we're going to get back to the news.
All right. When you're going live, if you opened up so that you could have chats and super chats, people could like super chat a question and maybe could answer it live. You know what I'm saying? So that every time someone was asking a question, there'd be a revenue attached to it.
That one I think I don't like, because it would discourage people from communicating. I mean, you know, I'm always checking my email during the show, and occasionally I'll respond to questions and comments that come in that way. The reason I don't have a live chat on the video feed on YouTube is it was being taken over by all kinds of troublemakers and shills, you know, who were screaming bad words at me, many of them in a foreign language.
Okay, I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. All
right, Mike, thank you for the time and your consideration.
Well, thank you for the
Say it,
suggestions. That first one was really good, and I'm going to work on the second one here. So thank you for the phone call. The phone lines are open now, 800-313-9443. Getting on back to miscellaneous news here. Facebook has been accused of spying on Instagram users through their phones' cameras. And apparently it's not always when people are using Instagram, and there's a concern about violations of privacy, because very often these electronic devices are in a person's home in areas where they might expect a little bit of privacy. Facebook is being accused of basically grabbing this information and selling it to marketing companies, which I guess is probably about as benign a use of that information as you can get. But there is still a principle that people like their privacy. And they don't like this idea that something is listening to them or watching them at all times. And as a matter of fact, the other day, Claire and I were just sitting in our living room talking about getting some WeatherTech liners for our car. And all of a sudden, the very next day, I'm being flooded with WeatherTech ads on my browser and my email. And I don't know how they got that information, but it's a little unsettling here. Okay, Twitter has apparently locked TV host Steve Malzberg's account after he linked to a video of Joe Biden groping a very young child. And it was basically locked, supposedly for violation of child sexual exploitation policy. I think Twitter just wanted to protect Biden from his own history here. All righty, over in Dusseldorf, Germany, there was a ransomware attack on a major hospital, and it resulted in widespread information technology failure. It forced medical personnel to redirect emergency patients to other facilities, including one woman who died. This may be the first death directly linked to a cyber attack. So German authorities revealed on Thursday they'd made contact with anonymous hackers who carried out a botched ransomware cyber attack that had unintentionally crippled the IT systems of the Dusseldorf University Clinic since the week prior. A total of 30 servers were encrypted the previous week, according to a recent report issued by the Justice Ministry of the state of North Rhine-Westphalia. Though an extortion note was uncovered on one of the encrypted servers, it was actually addressed to Heinrich Heine University, a school affiliated with but separate from the hospital. And this is another reason why I wish that somebody in government would take cybercrime a little bit more seriously. Now, obviously, if you attack a government server, they'll come after you. But out here in civilian land, cybercrime is running rampant. I was seeing a commercial for LifeLock is now offering a service to lock your mortgage, because apparently mortgage and title fraud is the fastest growing area of cybercrime, according to the FBI, where people are literally having their homes stolen and getting evicted from a home that they own outright that they hadn't sold. Okay, we got to take another break for a commercial, and we'll be right back with more news. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Ken in New York. Hello, Ken. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
It's amazing how little people understand how things work in a cell phone or a smartphone. For example,
yes,
I had a conversation with somebody a couple of weeks ago, and they said to her, how do you know that the camera and the microphone are really off? Oh, well, I turned them off.
Well, as I understand it, they can be turned on remotely again. And one of the reasons that all modern cell phones have a speakerphone capability is to justify a microphone that can hear the entire room.
Right. Well, the point is that the button itself does not turn the microphone or the camera on and off. It is being scanned by a circuit of the CPU, and the CPU does it. So that obviously means somebody else can, if there's a back door built into it, can easily control it remotely. And I'm sure they do.
Well, I'm pretty certain it was my smartphone that overheard my wife and I talking about WeatherTech, and was probably being, scanned by a machine that pulled out the word WeatherTech and said, this guy's interested in your product, which, I am. But it was a little unnerving to see it happen like that.
Well, I also have a sister in New York City, and we were discussing, she has a Gmail account, and once in a while I'll use email. And I have a paid account that I use that comes from Australia. I'm not sure that that's a good idea anymore.
True.
But we started discussing something about cat food. I said, I'm going to make an example because I said, watch what you say on this. And they have New York City cable company, must be big enough, and, it works both ways, and they probably have their internet attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
And she calls me back in a couple of days and says, we're getting advertisements for cat food.
Yeah. Well, it's nice that we're not getting advertisements for things we have no interest in. Unfortunately, when you're working in talk radio, you talk about a lot of things that are subjects on the radio show that you're not personally interested in. So, I get all kinds of weird ads and stuff here. Somebody was sending text messages to my cell phone for a porn site. I'm 68 years old, and I'm kind of a little past that sort of thing.
Well, I noticed something else about when you get calls or robocalls.
Yes.
I get home at certain times during the day. I don't have a regular schedule. I work a little in the morning and I work in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a probing going on because when somebody calls me and I inadvertently lift up on them, all of a sudden I get a bunch of other calls from other places.
Probably they are here. Now, one of the things I like about the latest version of the iPhone software is if apparently Apple is keeping a list of scam callers, and the call will go through to your phone and be registered, but it won't ring the phone, and it'll be labeled potential scam call. So, I'm seeing in recent calls, I'm seeing all these highlighted calls that didn't ring through to the phone. And I figure if it's really important, they'll leave a message. And if they don't, it's not somebody I want to talk to anyway. So at least Apple is trying to deal with this.
Well, this is, in my case, I'm just talking about it's a VoIP system. Okay. And I notice that I get a lot of calls. They come up on the caller ID as various villages and towns on Long Island. And I know from experience, if I lift up on one of them, I'm going to get, somebody offering me something. And yet, when I use the answering machine that goes through the answering machine, there must be a signal going on somewhere that they can detect because that doesn't trigger the swarm of calls. If it goes in the answering machine and I just ignore it, they always hang up, don't leave a message. And then I don't get the swarm. The mistake occurs if I pick it up at a certain time. I start getting these calls at a certain time during the day. It's like, okay, we know you're going to be home at that time of the day, so we're going to bombard you. That's all I have.
Yeah, it is an annoyance. I get more of those telemarketer calls than I get regular phone calls here. What's really interesting is, they try and say the call is coming from a number that's near where you live. But Claire and I are still using our Hawaii phone numbers for professional reasons. And so I'm getting all these calls from the 808 area code, from people I know they're marketing calls, so I never respond to them.
Oh, one last thing. You don't want to respond to some of them because you could very well be responding to a call that's out of the country, a phone number, an area code you don't recognize, and it might be just hooking you for the cost of making a phone call.
Yeah, there are certain area codes you can dial where it'll like bill your phone bill something like hundreds of dollars. It's an ugly scam that's out there, and nobody wants to do anything about it. I'm wondering, where's the Federal Trade Commission in all of this?
Yeah. That's all.
All right. Well, Mark, thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Ken in New York. Hello, Ken. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today? Kenny, that was Ken. I'm sorry. My mistake. Okay, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to get back to the regular news. Now, out in Kingman, Arizona, there's a group of people who call themselves the Downwinders. And basically what it is, during the Cold War, they would watch the skies light up by orange flashes from the atomic bombs detonated at a government testing site in Nevada, less than 150 miles north of the city. And they didn't think anything of it at the time. They thought they didn't think the tests were dangerous. Now, of course, all these years later, you've had all these people who've died of cancer, many before the age of 55, and now they're basically fighting for compensation, saying that the government subjected them to cancer, not to mention all the costs that are associated with that. And, it's going to be a long fight because the government never accepts responsibility for anything that they do. Okay, now, Alameda-based rocketry startup AstraScience had a recent fireworks display in a remote part of Alaska a couple of weeks ago. The company's 38-foot tall rocket prototype failed to reach orbit during its first test launch. Now, there's a big scandal brewing on how big oil misled the public into believing plastic could be recycled or would be recycled. Laura Liebrick, a manager at Rogue Disposal and Recycling in Southern Oregon, is standing on the end of its landfill watching an avalanche of plastic pour out of a semi-trailer. Containers, bags, packaging, yogurt cups. None of this plastic will be turned into new plastic things. All of it is buried. And she said, to me, that felt like a betrayal of the public trust and that she'd been lying to people unwittingly. Now, I remember when I was a kid, plastic was still very much in the future. Yes, that's how old I am. Recyclables were glass, which could and is recycled. I remember taking the empties back to the store from the soda pops, and getting the deposit back on the bottles here. And they were washed and reused, and that was kind of a good thing. But a lot of plastic can't be recycled. It is going into the landfills. I remember when we were living in Kaneohe, Hawaii, there were multiple bins in the trash area, and you had to put the aluminum cans in one, and you had to put your plastic bottles in another, and your glass went in a third, and there was a separate bin for newspaper, and then another bin just for everything else that didn't go in the others. And I remember one day watching the truck, the garbage truck, the trash truck show up there, and they just poured all the bins into the same back of the truck. There was no separation going on. It was all, it was mandated by law that we had to have these separate bins, and we had to put things in the separate bins. But there was no back end to any of this stuff. No back end on any of this stuff. Okay, I wish they would. I think recycling's a really good idea. By the way, speaking of recycling, apparently these face masks we're all being told to wear, they're becoming a major source of environmental pollution. People will take them off and just toss them. Apparently they're showing up in the oceans now. They're becoming as ubiquitous as the little plastic can holders for soft drinks here. All righty, over in New Jersey, there's an 89-year-old grandmother, Glenn Christie Goldenthal, suffers from Alzheimer's. She's maintained her own home for years in New Jersey and done so without incident. Despite her illness, Goldenthal has remembered to pay the government the taxes they demand every year, most of them. In 2019, she underpaid her bill by 6 cents, 1 nickel and 1 penny, which created the perfect governmental storm, because the state claims the authority to force you to pay them for property you own. If you are late paying them, they add on fees and interest that send your bill skyrocketing. Case in point is the fact that Goldenthal's unpaid bill of 6 cents snowballed into more than a $300 bill. That's a 5,000 times increase on the original amount owned. Now, since Goldenthal suffers from Alzheimer's, she didn't understand when the city called her and told her that her home was now being put up for auction over 1 nickel and 1 penny. I don't know, if I'd been in that office, taking the payment, I just would have reached into my pocket for the 6 cents. Ridiculous here. All righty, London's bridges are, in fact, falling down. Pictures reveal how crumbling infrastructure and dreaded COVID-friendly traffic measures are crippling London's crucial Thames crossings. These are an emblem of Britain's engineering prowess and steeped in hundreds of years of history, but pictures reveal how London's bridges are disintegrating into the Thames as they suffer through lack of funds. I hope that doesn't include the Tower Bridge. By the way, you remember that real estate development that was out in, I think it was in Nevada, or is it Lake Havasu? I think it was Lake Havasu. And they bought the London Bridge. It's famous in song, London Bridge is falling down, blah, blah, blah. And apparently they thought they were buying the Tower Bridge. and the early architectural renderings of the property showed the Tower Bridge on the drive leading up to this resort. But it turns out there was a miscommunication because London Bridge is not the Tower Bridge. The Tower Bridge is the Tower Bridge. And so they wound up with this, they wound up with a London Bridge, but not the one they thought. Apparently, archaeologists have uncovered 27 ancient wooden coffins buried for 2,500 years in Egypt in the largest discovery of its kind. 27 sarcophagi that were buried 2,500 years ago have been discovered in Egypt. Archaeologists working at the ancient Saqqara necropolis near Cairo uncovered the incredible collection. It's estimated that only 1/3 of Egypt's antiquities have been found so far, despite all the digging and remote sensing and everything that's going on here. Initially, only 13 sarcophagi were found earlier this month, but further efforts have uncovered an extra 14. All righty, for those of you who keep your eyes on the skies, apparently at least 5 space rocks are currently headed towards Earth this week. Japan is going to extend its Hayabusa 2 asteroid hunter mission. So we're having this cosmic barrage of boulders and debris. NASA is warning of at least 5 close asteroid flybys this week. None are expected to hit. This happened just days after Japan's space agency announced it would be extending its asteroid hunter mission. To kick things off, yesterday, the 10-meter and 16-meter 2020 RQ-6 and 2020 SJ-2 shot past the Earth at distances of 1.2 and 1.4 million kilometers, respectively. I know that looks like a huge distance, but in astronomical terms, that was a near miss. 3 more near-Earth objects are expected to fly past. Actually, today was going to happen. And we're all still here. All righty. Paleontologists have uncovered a new 125-million-year-old dinosaur species in China. Paleontologists digging in China have discovered a new burrowing dinosaur species believed to have existed 125 million years ago. The fossils were uncovered in a geological formation known as the Lujiatun Beds in Jingzhou, a city in the central west Liaoning province of China. The Lujiatun beds, rented lips, are the oldest layer of the larger Xixian formation known for its preserved fossils. They're finding a lot of stuff over there. Speaking of dinosaurs, we've all seen the Spinosaurus in the Jurassic Park movies, but it turns out Spielberg's depiction of the animal was in error. They had it running across the ground and chasing the stars and snapping its teeth shut on them. But it has been suspected for a long time because of the actual shape of the snout and the skull that it actually led an aquatic existence. In fact, there was an article in National Geographic a while back basically correcting this perception and saying that, yes, Spinosaurus lived primarily in the water and lived on fish. And they have found hundreds of Spinosaurus teeth unearthed in an ancient riverbed that flowed through the Sahara Desert 100 million years ago that confirm this observation. The giant predator had an aquatic lifestyle. Larger than the Tyrannosaurus, the 50-foot, 7-ton Spinosaurus lived in North Africa some 95 to 100 million years ago. With a limited fossil record to analyze, scientists had assumed it was a land dweller. And no, it is not. Okay, phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Okay, interesting little article that came out of patriotrising.com. Mandatory mask wearing is silent terrorism meant for psychological submission. This dovetails in with that story we reported earlier where so-called medical experts are saying face masks are now going to be permanent, which I will not accept, just so that you know where I stand on this whole thing. But the agenda is clear as day and is being implemented not only as a test of mass societal compliance, but also to force people apart and to remove closeness, expression, and emotion from the human psyche. What they're trying to discourage is people talking to each other. That's the reason for that 6-foot separation. It's already been proven that coronavirus can travel that 6-foot separation easily. But if you're 6 feet apart, it's harder to hold a discussion about what's going on with the government, what's going on with the wars. And this is a purposeful state exercise with the intent of destroying the spirit of the American public, leaving only a society of unfeeling and obedient drones waiting the next order handed down from on high. Okay. Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly of the Louisville Metro Police Department, who was shot by Breonna Taylor's boyfriend while leading a drug raid on their apartment last March, sent out a fiery email to around 1,000 police officers early today, lamenting how cops are being demonized in the age of Black Lives Matter while criminals are being canonized. Ron Paul is still out there campaigning for Julian Assange, saying that this is a war on truth here. Now, over in Pennsylvania, there's a lot of flip-flopping going on regarding the coming election. A judge ruled, I think it was last week, that, we got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today here, and we're talking about Pennsylvania and some things that are happening with the coming election there. Last week, a judge ruled that votes had to be counted even if the vote signature didn't match that on the registration. I mean, that just opens up a huge door to vote fraud and ballot harvesting and so forth. But apparently there is an obscure law in Pennsylvania that might result in 100,000 mail-in ballots being thrown out without being counted. And this is a requirement for the vote, the mail-in ballot, to be enclosed in what's called a secrecy envelope. And it seems rather silly, but that is the law. And it's going to contribute to what is likely to be the most chaotic election in American history. And we're going to see the wrangling over what votes should be counted and what votes should not be counted. I was seeing some people, the experts on Fox News earlier today arguing why 2020 is not going to be a repeat of 30-30. So, I'm sorry, a repeat of 2000. I was distracted there for a minute. And so, let's see. Anyway, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is telling Americans to take to the streets, radicalize, and fight as Trump and the GOP Senate consider Ginsburg's successor. According to the Che Guevara protege and Democratic Socialist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the U.S. Supreme Court seat just vacated by Ginsburg belongs to her and her fellow left-wing revolutionaries. It doesn't belong to the American people and is not subject to the processes prescribed by the Constitution for the replacement of high court justices. She actually apparently said that the Constitution should not apply. Now, one of the issues that is surrounding the new nominee to the Supreme Court is the Second Amendment. Now, before last Friday, it was urgent for every gun owner in the country to vote in the November election. And now with the death of Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg, it is critical for the survival of the Second Amendment to retain the Republican majority in the U.S. Senate and for Donald Trump to be elected to a second term. This is coming from a lot of people in the gun rights community. Okay. 87% of New York City bars and restaurants couldn't make their August rent. COVID has upended middle-class family finances. It really does seem to be hitting them here. Patriots line up for miles in Ohio to see Donald Trump. Record-breaking GOP fundraising haul just in time for the final Trump push. And let's see. All righty. We talked about Boris Johnson announcing numerous further level 4 restrictions that will last for a further 6 months. Joe Biden is striking out at the president. He seems to be going back to bashing him for his response to the COVID death toll. There was a White House press conference earlier today, and I got to tell you that McEnany, she's amazing. We're going to see her in Congress somewhere down the road. I'm willing to bet a whole nickel on that. Okay, there's the music. It's time for me to get out of here. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please spread the word of Republic Broadcasting. Spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate. We need your help to get through this rough patch right now. And I know you're all short. So are we. But we need your help. Please chip in all that you can. There's no such thing as too small a donation. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.